This is my 36th year in the civil service, and I have never seen change come this fast. You're absolutely right. The Prime Minister himself personally believes that we need to approach AI with a positive mindset.
Share with us how India's AI story is unfolding.
India is showing is part of what one could call the third wave.
There are some who may argue that India has been a little slow on the uptake, both in terms of infrastructure and in terms of overall innovation.
I don't think India as a country has been slow on the uptake on this at all. We now have more than 38,000 GPU which have come up on offer. It's not that we are denying anybody the resource. We are working on building the best of infrastructure and the best of models in India.
There are huge investments coming from the likes of Google. On the other hand, there is also a very clear push from the government to say, you know what, let's use local. We know the headlines around Zoho, for instance. How are you balancing these twin objectives?
I think we need both. We are not a closed economy. We are not closing ourselves out to anybody who wants to come and invest, especially technology which is coming in. At the same time, we will be sure that we build a capacity in India, and we will build it right from the word go.
Overarching AI legislation is not something that India is going to consider at this stage.
I will say at this stage. We are watching the situation very closely and standing ready in case we need to legislate.
How India's IT secretary is adopting AI himself.
I somehow feel that my natural stupidity is adequate.
Great to have with us here Secretary Krishnan, India's IT Secretary. Sir, thank you so much for talking to us on India AI in action, and clearly a lot of action in the AI world, a lot of action in India. Share with us how India's AI story is unfolding.
Thank you for having me on this podcast. And clearly, this is a very momentous time globally and in India. The pathways that we see on AI adoption and the way that AI itself is rolling out globally and in India, there are some contrasts, there are some differences, but it is something that is exciting both at the global level and at the national level. Globally, of course, we know the story of the big tech companies getting into AI, the huge investments which are being made, the compute companies which are doing very well, the stratospheric valuations of some of the AI companies. All that is well documented and it's a well-known story. We also know that there is a geopolitical dimension to this. Now, India's story here is a little different. What India is showing is part of what one could call the third way.
The third way, yeah.
It's a way by which you are being more frugal in the way that you're deploying resources. The government is acting by intent as a catalyst, both in terms of policy and in terms of some resources. But working very closely with all stakeholders, including the private sector, to see how we can actually promote a version which is relatively frugal in terms of the way that it uses some of the most expensive parts of AI, the infrastructure, the compute infrastructure, and also the way that models are built, but is focusing primarily on applications and on the way that it can be applied to specific or specialized sectors, specifically of the economy or even of the various manufacturing and services sectors where it can be applied and where it can get the best possible outcomes in terms of productivity and in terms of what it can do for the Indian economy as a whole. The second part, of course, is that rolling out these applications, actually getting such applications done and deploying them across various companies and various other institutions, both in India and outside, is probably a huge economic opportunity and a business opportunity for our Indian IT companies. We have a strong IT sector, and also for Indian startups. So I think that is the big opportunity that we should be looking at and seeing how India's STEM human resources are able to take advantage of this.
You've mentioned several parts here, and let's take it one by one. First, I think your approach to being more frugal, and I think the way you're putting it across, it seems like an intentional approach by India when you say frugal. However, there are those who understand the IT space and the pace at which the transformation is taking place, especially if we look at the innovation that's taking place in the Valley. There's some who may argue that India has been a little slow on the uptake, both in terms of infrastructure and in terms of overall innovation. So whether it's in the government helping and supporting and providing the infrastructure, or the private sector, or even the startups innovating.
I think there are two parts to this. I don't think India as a country
Right.
has been slow on the uptake on this at all. I think one, in terms of the preparedness of our human resources for AI, in terms of the penetration of AI in the scientific community or in the technically trained human resources, is rated as one of the highest in the
Right.
world. Right? I mean, the Stanford AI Index clearly rates it there. And then there is other recent evidence which shows that in the way that AI itself is used in India compared to other places, it's used much more for specific activities in governance or
Sure.
in productive sectors as opposed to just making cat videos.
Right. I like the term cat videos, and let's talk about that adoption play that you're referring to, and that India is going to be that adoption market. And if we just look at the way some of the top global AI giants are now making a beeline for India, of course we know Anthropic top boss was here, OpenAI has made its intent clear. Clearly, India is going to be this big market for the large AI giants. At the same time, the question that is emerging is that how is India viewing this? Will India continue to encourage the global players to come, make investments here, but at the same time step up its sovereign AI capabilities?
I think we have to do both,
Right.
and that is the primary intent. Early on in the duration of the India AI mission, there was some hesitation on whether we should actually make investments on India's own models, foundational models. And that was one of the elements of the India AI mission, one of the pillars which was rolled out last, because there was internal debate. People were arguing, saying that India should focus much more on applications. There is no point in investing huge resources on building a model, foundation model of your own.
Right.
We discussed that, debated that, spoke to a large number of experts before finally coming to the conclusion that it was important that we build a foundation model of our own for a number of reasons, strategic reasons, and also the reason that culturally the model needed to be India specific in terms of using Indian databases in Indian languages and so on. So for that reason, we were clear that there had to be an India specific model. But the building of that model is going to be relatively less expensive than the way that models have been built elsewhere in the world. And that is becoming clearer because we've had an open process in which many startups and academic and research institutions have applied to us. The kind of funding they've asked for and the manner in which they've asked for it have been very reasonable. And
Right.
it's again custom built for specific requirements and needs. So that's what I mean when I said it's frugal. It's not that we are denying anybody the resources. We are making resources available. And it's also inventive and innovative. Just to give you an example, where it comes to the AI compute.
Yeah.
When the AI mission was taken to cabinet, part of our intention and what we promised was that we'll create at least 10,000 GPU worth of compute capacity,
Right.
possibly through a viability gap fund model or a alternate model
Right.
of public-private partnership. That was what we thought it would be. Eventually, we decided not to go with the viability gap fund model to begin with. We went instead with what I would describe as a voucher-based model.
Voucher based, yes.
So that it's available for innovators, it's available for researchers and students and others who want to use it, but it's on a pay-by-use basis.
Correct.
And encouraging the private sector to actually make those investments. Part of the reason was that we wanted a level playing field in terms of those who had already made investments being able to participate and to add people as they came along. And that approach, to be honest, has been very successful. We now have more than 38,000 GPU which have come up on offer. We have the fourth round of bids to be opened shortly, so there'll be more GPUs to be added, and that's many times what we initially promised would be delivered as a GPU.
Is it enough?
compute.
Is the question.
We'll have to keep building.
Right.
And I think the point is that it's a flexible process where we keep adding.
Sure.
And we keep adding this, and eventually organizations like the United Nations and others have asked us, saying, if you're able to add capacity here in India, will you be willing to make it available for the rest of the world?
Right.
So that is also a possibility.
Right. So as you ramp up capacity, I think the bigger question then is that are we doing enough to give assurance to the private sector that there is a market out here? Because at the end of the day, is the government buying? Is the government emerging as a buyer? Because the one thing that is clearly required for deep tech sectors or sectors like AI is that not only you have that intent, you also have the infrastructure being built out, but also the government being a customer.
Government being a customer, of course, is very important. That is one segment of it. And government is coming forward proactively. And,
Right.
this capacity that we are building up is meant both for government and for use by the private sector and the academic sector. So we are also an important segment of the market, but there are others. So to that extent, there's an assurance that there would be a market for the GPUs that will be installed. Equally, we are also coming forward with sharing data sets.
Yes.
If you look at it, because government, the other way we can contribute is we have access to a lot of data. We have a lot of data sets that we have. Currently, more than 3,000 data sets we are offering on the AI course platform, which can be used again by innovators, researchers, and others to figure out how they can use it and build more models. So I think to that extent, the government is certainly sort of partnering. I mean, this is, in a sense, truly public-private partnership-driven project and multi-stakeholder-driven project.
I want to touch about on the foundational models before we go deeper also into the use cases and adoption, because a lot of conversation there clearly around India's LLMs, and you're saying that yes, the government took a very conscious decision, but now that we have sort of gone down that path, are you satisfied with the pace at which it's evolving? Of course, there's a lot of pressure. Everyone's like, okay, you've got a Chat GPT, you've got a DeepSeek. When is India's LLM coming, or is it coming at all? Will it be of those standards? Is the government feeling the pressure as much, or you think
it is a
it's a
pressure we feel all the time. I mean, I'm asked all the time saying, when is the next one coming? It's a pressure that we have placed on people who we are working with.
Sure.
And I think we are working closely with them. We are also being very adaptive and flexible to accommodate what their requirements are. This is an emerging field. They ask for something to begin with, then they have a change in terms of what they actually want. So we are accommodating all of those. I'm confident. I mean, definitely one of the companies, Sarvam, should be ready. They have indicated to us by the end of 2025, they will be ready with their model.
Right.
So I think that holds a lot of promise. Likewise, Bharat Gen, which is being done by IIT Mumbai, is fairly advanced as well. They already had a grant from the Department of Science and Technology under another mission. So now this is an add-on that we are giving them. And to that extent, I'm confident that something good will come out. The remaining models are all smaller models.
Yes.
They are smaller foundation models, specific. One of them is on, healthcare, looking at the way that you could study EEGs to make better outcomes out of those reports. Another one is on studying critical materials. So there are a number of other models which are specific in their approach and which would be important for those specific fields. Their requirements in terms of compute capacity and so on may not be as much, even at the stage of training. So I think I'm quite confident that it will work.
Great. Let's now talk regulations, because at the Startup Policy Forum, we track regulations very, very closely. And we've been very grateful for the support we've been getting from your ministry. But while we're staying on the whole LLM datasets conversation, the one question that comes up naturally when large LLM giants like, OpenAI and Anthropic and Perplexity see India as a market is that, are we going to do something that will help build India's sovereign capabilities in a way that will be mandated by policy? So say localizing inferencing or incentivizing by way of policy, creating policy advantage for the local startups. Is that something the government has in mind?
I think one of the elements of this is that as the compute capacity gets created locally, the incentives are being offered only on the compute which is located in India.
Right.
If the compute is located somewhere else, then it works on a different basis altogether. So to that extent, and they'll have to pay much more. Our rates are much, much lower. The rate itself is lower, and then there's a subsidy from the government on top of that. So I would think that automatically that
Sure.
incentivizes data staying in India, the compute being used being in India, and so on. And eventually, when the model does come up, we will have to see how it gets used more. If we have a model of our own, then clearly for certain purposes, we will have to use that model much more. And that is something that once we have the model with us, then we'll have to examine based on how good the model is. So I think let's be clear on this. I think India's IT revolution was driven by an approach where Indians always had access to the best possible facilities,
Right.
whether it was infrastructure in terms of, the IT hardware which they needed to use, or in terms of the technology. So to that extent, I think, since a lot of it is as a knowledge economy and driven by how people apply it, it's important that they have access to the best of what there is. We are working on building the best of infrastructure and the best of models in India.
Right.
And once they are available, then clearly the preference will be to use them in preference to whatever else can be given from elsewhere in the world. So that is something which we are clear about. As far as applications is concerned, and as far as deployment of applications is concerned, that is where India's advantage truly lies. So I think there we will be competitive by definition.
And I will talk a lot more about applications because that is going to be the India play. But just to close the loop around regulations, and you mentioned geopolitics as well, and a lot has changed in the current geopolitical environment. What we're seeing clearly is also, on one hand, of course, there are huge investments coming from the likes of Google. You were there at that facility at Vizag, where we saw that big ticket announcement coming. On the other hand, there is also a very clear push from the government to say, you know what, let's use local. We know the headlines around Zoho, for instance. So when it comes to AI, is it something that we think is also going to be the direction India is going to take? At the same time, realizing that we do need the tools as well as the innovation that's coming from some of these global giants. How are you balancing these twin objectives?
I think we need both. We need to continue to have access to the kind of technology, the best technology that is available globally. And as long as we continue to have access, we will continue to take it. I think that is one important element. And therefore, we are not a closed economy. We are not closing ourselves out to anybody who wants to come and invest, especially technology which is coming in. So that part of it is fairly clear. At the same time, this is one area where we will be sure that we build a capacity in India,
Right.
and we will build it right from the word go. So I think we are doing both, and it is again part of intention and part of strategy and part of our policy to do both.
And the government doesn't worry about the fact that there are fears that, okay, these big AI companies are going to come to India. India is going to be a huge market in terms of being able to, for their foundation models, use the data, train their models on the kind of extensive data that has, and ultimately, it's going to be their advantage versus India's advantage. That's not something that the government worries about.
I think let's be clear on this. India's data is in India. There's substantial amounts of data. It is there to be used. We are offering it as data sets and so on.
With
We would
AI
expect
push, right.
we would expect Indian companies to use it. It will be available for them. It's something which is an opportunity that Indian companies have to use, and they have to come up. At the same time, I don't think we should be closed off, especially in the technology space. I think in the way that the world will emerge now, whatever we make in India should be globally competitive, and therefore you have to make it in the face of global competition.
Absolutely. And that's why embracing global competition is important. You mentioned applications, and I want to talk about applications because that's where the India story is emerging. I can tell you on India AI in Action, we have been featuring a number of startups that are our members, whether it is Ixigo or it's Razor Pay or it's InVideo, that are truly now seeing those use cases play out and the way AI is transforming these companies. Secretary, I'd love to understand how the government is viewing the application play. Are there certain sectors or certain specific use cases that are exciting the government in terms of how it's going to actually transform the way many of the services in India are being used?
As far as we are concerned, I think, as I already mentioned, India's biggest opportunity lies in the applications and the
Right.
way the applications get deployed. And what we are looking at is two or three things. One, we are looking at the deployment, that is, the creation of applications and their deployment in the most productive sectors of the economy. Whether it is going to be agriculture, whether it's going to be manufacturing, whether it is going to be healthcare, education, any of these sectors, and even specialized services sectors within finance, within the entire, insurance, pension, investment kind of segments. in law, in each of these segments. Clearly, I think there's an opportunity to significantly enhance productivity, enhance the way that those sectors itself function, so that we are able to actually realize much higher productivity outcomes. Recently, I was reading a very insightful article which said that, strangely enough, China as a country invested heavily in robotics,
Right.
although one would have assumed that they would not have invested, because robotics is something which replaces human labor.
Humans, and they have a
And they have a huge demographic. I mean, they have a population and they need not have done it. But having invested in that, they've actually become one of the most advanced countries in robotics, and they make more robots than the rest of the world together. So clearly, sometimes you have to do something which is counterintuitive.
Right.
And the assumption that using AI will actually displace human work in India is probably not really true, for two or three reasons. One, that I think the total number of white collar jobs we have in India is significantly lower as a proportion of our overall population and as a proportion of our workforce compared to the West.
Right.
Therefore, and today's AI, the way it works is it's basically replacing non-manual workers, right? And so to that extent, we have less to fear, because elsewhere they are replacing a lot of knowledge workers, workers in the non-manual space, in the white-collar jobs. We have fewer jobs, therefore we have less to fear. The second part of it is that our trained human resources in ITES can be upskilled, can be reskilled to work in the AI space to really fuel this application development and deployment requirement that the world will have. And so there is a fresh or a different opportunity for them. And the third opportunity which I see is that there's no reason why the quality of services that we experience today, whether in the real sectors of the economy, whether it is in the sectors where the private sector is operating or even where the government is operating, shouldn't be substantially enhanced.
Right.
Even governance and so on, even productivity within government. I mean, it's not a question of replacing people in government. It's a question of making them that much more productive,
And efficient. Yeah.
and efficient, so that there's so much more that can be done. And I think we need to look at it that way, that, the quality of services would improve. Many things would get automated, so that the focus would be on really the intellectual work or the policy oriented work, which will result in better outcomes. We can handle things faster.
Sure.
We can reduce wait times for many things, and turnaround times would improve. All of that will speed up the economy and would fuel growth, and that is the expectation truly. And the other jobs which are there and which are in the manual segment of the economy will, I presume, continue and should continue.
Secondly, when we talk to a lot of experts or to startups and the way they're adopting, it's a very similar, thought process. Of course, there will be some disruption, there will be some pain, there will be some job replacement, job losses as well. But the way you're saying, I think the clear understanding is there will be a lot of effort that will be needed in upskilling, in retraining, and in taking AI as an opportunity rather than a crisis when it comes to the job front. But you're saying, as the government of India is not overly concerned about the whole job loss situation with regard to AI. It's something that you've assessed and you feel it is not something that's going to hurt India in a big way. Rather, it's an opportunity.
Absolutely. I think this is a message we get right from the top. The Prime Minister himself personally believes that we need to approach AI with a positive mindset in terms of the good that it can do and what it can deliver in terms of enhanced productivity for the economy, and approach it from that perspective rather than approach it from a sense of fear and a sense of, what can go wrong.
Absolutely. And I think you've already touched upon the entire BPO IT services space. We were with the venture capitalist Vinod Khosla, who was talking about how the entire IT services space of India, the entire sector is going to see a transformation. But you're saying this is actually an opportunity for them to adapt quickly, to reskill and actually make that an advantage. You specifically mentioned that right from the top, from Prime Minister Modi, there is a clear intent that AI should be seen as a force for good, as an opportunity, and not something we fear. At the same time, there is fear also on the regulatory front around the harm that AI can do, and that's something also squarely sitting under you in terms of regulations. What has been absolutely commendable as far as the Indian government's concerned is the approach to AI regulations. From what I've heard you talk always, and in our conversations, you've said India will have an innovation first approach to regulation and regulation as needed rather than knee jerk, over encompassing regulation that some other countries and some other models seem to be following. Is that a thinking that is continuing even now?
Absolutely. I think it's the same set of thinking. I think we have been consistent in our message that it is innovation which will come first and innovation which will promote, which we will continue to promote. Second, that we believe that we have a legal framework with us right now which can handle many of the issues and harms which can come up as a result of AI. And where necessary, we will make the tweaks to make sure that those are addressed. And that's something we have consistently done. And the third part is that we are watching the situation very closely, assessing the situation very closely, discussing with people, and understanding and standing ready in case we need to legislate. We are studying what is happening in other countries, the way that they are approaching this, the kind of legislation they are attempting, and if a legislation is needed at some point in time, we would be able to legislate and legislate quickly, even if that is needed quickly. But as of now, I think we have taken a very graded and slow approach on regulation. We've used existing legal provisions. I think if you look at it from a number of perspectives, what are the kind of harms we are talking about? We are talking about one set of harms is about misrepresentation and deepfakes. Our existing law is, in my view, fairly stable, fairly strong, well tested. So in 21, we amended the intermediary guidelines and made them tighter and brought in this notion of what needs to come into the community guidelines or various social media intermediaries. That, with some back and forth with the industry, is now very well adopted. And we have excellent compliance, and almost every social media intermediary accepts what we have to say. They just ask for clarity, and we provide that clarity from time to time. I think the experience there on the whole has been fairly good. The second part of it, and it's balanced. It's balanced both sides. The second part of it is that we are looking at other harms, and if we have to grade and tighten, just to give you an example, again, in terms of labeling of AI content, synthetically generated content, you would recall that in March of 24, we had put out an advisory requiring companies to actually ensure that labeled content is provided. Many started doing it, and a lot of content was specifically labeled. Some were not doing it, so there was an issue. So we've now tried to step it up another notch and brought in a new set of amendments to the rules, which will enable labeling in a particular format. We put it out for consultation. We're getting feedback, and we'll see how to act on the basis of that feedback, and the rules will be finalized after we have studied the feedback that we've received. So that is one part of the story. That's one aspect. The second aspect is how data is used. So there are two sets to this. One aspect on data is personal data. So the DPDP framework will take care of that personal data thing. The other part of it is how data gets, the creator's rights, so to speak.
The copyright issues.
Copyright issues. There is DPIIT has a committee which is looking into the copyright issues. So we are addressing those concerns there. Plus the matter is also before courts, and we'll await whatever is the verdict of the courts. So those set of issues are being addressed there. The other set of issues is really about the fear of job losses. And as I said, our approach on AI is clearly not one of fear. We believe that through policy and through other measures, we should be able to address the job loss issue as it comes up. We are looking, and retraining is possibly the most effective strategy to be taken there in terms of existing jobs. And in terms of future jobs, it is something that we are consulting extensively. We are speaking to the school education department and the higher education department, the All India Council for Technical Education, and a whole host of others to make sure that curricula are tweaked. We made it clear to both the school education and higher education departments that students across the board need to understand how AI works.
Right.
It's not something which is meant only for somebody who's doing a computer science program, but it's meant for everybody. Even in liberal arts, how is AI going to change the way art is generated or literature is generated? I mean, every piece of that is going to make a difference. In law, it is going to make a difference. So how can you use it in each of those areas is something which is specifically being targeted. So we will have a AI-ready human resource base, and the workforce will be prepared for AI, which means that they can adapt to the new situation. So these are all legitimate concerns, but I think we have to face those concerns, create solutions which will address them, some of them by law or regulation, some of it through specific initiatives and policy, not necessarily law and legislation. But as I always say, in case we have to legislate, in case the risks reach a stage where a legislation is required, we will legislate.
So just to summarize, on the policy front, on the legislation front, the way India is approaching is that right now it's a graded approach. All the aspects that you've mentioned, whether it's on deepfakes, whether it's around labeling of AI content, or it is around copyright issues or personal data, you feel the current architecture covers it, and where needed, the government is acting rather quickly. We saw the recent, amendments that you're talking about on content labeling, and that's the approach you would continue to take. But the overall one big ticket overarching AI legislation is not something that India is going to consider at this stage.
I will say at this stage. It is not that we say that we will never consider it.
Sure.
Based on requirement, we will act based on needs.
Secretary Krishnan, clearly we're seeing the government is taking a very thoughtful and a very calibrated approach on all fronts, whether it is in terms of infrastructure or it is in terms of deployment or in terms of embracing and adopting technology or in regulation. So I think it is something that the government is thinking through. And of course, under your leadership, we're seeing that India's AI story is playing out in what we call the India way in many ways, which is going to be very unique. We'd love to talk to you a little more about the upcoming AI summit in February, and of course about how you are adopting AI. So perhaps we can take a little walk outside and have that conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Secretary Krishnan, a lot of excitement and buzz around India, especially on the upcoming summit. And of course, your ministry is the nodal ministry that will be organizing it. Would love to get a sense from you now to understand why this is going to be a real big moment for India. I mean, it'll probably be India's moment to achieve that leadership it's been wanting in Global South with the upcoming summit.
I think the summit is very important because it showcases the view that India has about AI, the positive mindset which the Prime Minister keeps emphasizing, with which we need to look at AI and to adopt technology. We truly believe that this is the one opportunity that India has to adopt this horizontal technology, which could make all the difference in ensuring that India becomes a developed nation in about 20 years' time. So I think that is the crux of what it is, why we want to be there, why we want to adopt. The second part of it is that I think the approach that we have to the way that AI would be done in India, the so-called India way, is something that fits very much for the Global South. And that is again something we would like to communicate, saying that we have a leadership role here. There is support that we can offer to many other countries in the world in the way that AI itself would be implemented. And that, I think, is something which is good for both those countries and good for India as well.
And preparations are already underway, as we can see. But what would success look like for India as far as the summit is concerned and after the summit as well?
I think the most important thing will be the outcomes. The summit being well attended and the summit having representatives from a number of countries is undoubtedly, and also a number of companies, leading companies, is undoubtedly an endorsement of where India stands in this entire AI space. And it would reflect faith, and it would reflect confidence in India's ability in this area. But that alone is not it. We'll have to have actual outcomes, worthwhile outcomes which come out of this summit. We'll have to figure out what is the way forward, what would be the specific mechanisms that would be adopted both by countries and by companies to take this forward as a global move.
And when you say outcomes, what are the kind of outcomes you're referring to? Is it more on the policy front? Is it more on the adoption front? What would success look like on outcomes?
On outcomes, it would fundamentally be certain commitments in terms of outcome documents where countries commit to making available resources for the way that they can get democratized and decentralized, and also on areas like skilling and how this could then move forward for the rest of the world. Fundamentally, we are looking at it as an impact summit and the positive impact that it can have on people, fundamentally, on the planet itself, in terms of, what commitments can we have in the way that data centers would be established for AI requirements, the compute facility would be more green, all of those, and how more of compute would be available, more of the infrastructure would be available for more of the global south.
And also a lot of interoperability, whether it is on regulations or it's on infrastructure usage or in terms of just responsible AI. So is that something you're hoping to achieve consensus?
I think that is, those are all very important elements. So I think a declaration or a statement which comes out or a document which comes out at the end of this covering all of these important aspects would be key.
And how's the initial interest looking? I know the logo has been released. I've personally attended many of the pre-event summits that are already the pre-summit events that are already underway. Do you think the excitement's building up?
The excitement is building up totally. I keep hearing every day of events which are being held across the world and across India. This morning, somebody messaged me saying that there was an AI event which was held in Kakinada in Andhra Pradesh.
Lovely.
Somewhere else, I got another message about an event being held in Buenos Aires, and another event being held in Brazil, an event in South Africa. So it's all over the world. And we had a very, very successful event in New York as part of the UN General Assembly when I was there. So I think there's a lot of interest around the globe.
And heads of state as well as top AI companies all will be present here in February?
Yes, a number of governments and number of embassies located in Delhi have reached out to us. There's a lot of interest. Letters have gone out to a large number of countries. So something we are really looking forward to.
All right, the whole world's looking forward to the summit, but I want to now close our conversation by getting a little sense of how India's IT secretary is adopting AI himself. So, so tell me, Secretary, do you use AI? Are you using it?
No, I somehow feel that my natural stupidity is adequate. But to be honest, I think in some ways, I think in the ministry's work, we are using it in certain areas.
Sure.
Especially when we need to look at a lot of history of what is going on. When we are replying to old parliament questions and, new parliament questions come up. So what is important there is consistency with reference to what has been said in the past.
Sure.
So AI tools help us there. So all of that is interesting ways in which we use it. There are, some of our applications, we are using bots more and more, and those are effective. There are occasions when we've used translation tools. Translation tools, I think it's been very, very effective. In work, I think a lot of it gets used. Personally, a little less. Personally, occasionally, once in a while, you're trying to find out something, and either for fun or seriously, you look at this. The younger generation is much more savvy.
Sure.
My son sort of looks at it, and sometimes, somebody from that generation comes up and says, did you see this? And this is how it comes up. So
are you learning from the
I learn from that generation, and it's very also interesting to see that the older generation is picking up. Not necessarily AI, but with technology and some of the content, they're getting aware of this. My mother, who's 82, sometimes picks up on some of this and says, okay, I believe this YouTube video that I watched is AI content. Is that true? So there's that awareness and all of that which is happening. And very interestingly, the other day, there was somebody who's building a model who came to meet me, and it is a conversational bot. And it is also an emotional conversational bot.
Yeah.
It is not just about, information, but it also responds to the kind of emotions that the person on the other side is reflecting. And we were really musing on the huge opportunity that it would provide for, lonely people, particularly the older people.
Correct.
It's interesting. Some of my earlier work in Tamil Nadu, we had a big study which was done amongst the elderly because, that part of the country is aging faster than the rest of the country. So one of the policy issues we had identified was that. And when we were studying that, and in the first wave, one of the big findings which came out amongst older people was loneliness. And if I'm getting there and you're really wondering whether, you can actually use technology to tackle some of these issues.
Yes, I think the fact that AI can be a force for good, but also the whole element of responsible AI, I think all of that builds into these conversations we're having around AI adoption every day. But Secretary, I think the one question that's very interesting is, as someone who's been a policy person, we know that innovation always precedes regulation. And, we expect policymakers, decision makers like yourself, regulators, to say, yes, we're keeping pace, but let innovation play out and then policies will follow. But this is one technology where everyone's finding it hard to keep pace. Like, even those who are bang in the midst of it wake up and you know what? Something's changed. How are you, as India's topmost bureaucrats, coping up with the pace of change and the pace of information that's coming your way?
You're absolutely right. I mean, I haven't seen anything like this. This is my 36th year in the civil service, and I have never seen change come this fast. And, the other day, I was at one of these events where we were launching with the Niti Aayog a new set of documents. And then in my speech, I said something about the number of AI models we had hosted on AI Kosh. And then by the time the minister spoke, he checked online and found that the number had gone up.
Right.
And on that day, he said, we are at 2,000. And that's less than a week ago or 10 days ago. And now we are at 3,000. So, that the pace at which this is changing, not even in India, not just, of course, globally, what is happening is very, very rapid and newer things keep coming out. But this is a space which changes very rapidly, and it's going to challenge all of us in terms of keeping abreast and figuring out how we do regulation and how we put in a regulation which will actually address some of these issues. Even our entire approach to the way we do policy and we do regulation needs to change a bit. I think we need greater flexibility, greater nimbleness, quicker ways of adapting to what the situations are going to be. Sometimes if you ossify something by putting it into a regulation in particular terms, it might actually hamstring us when we want to act in a particular way. So I think we'll have to change some of those approaches, fundamental approaches to.
Secretary, at the Startup Policy Forum, we always try to act as a bridge between in India's innovation ecosystem and the policy ecosystem, between startups and policymakers. And the one question I have for you is, how can our startups support the government at this point? What's your one message to them?
I think the most important thing, and I respect what the Startup Policy Forum is doing, because the startup founders themselves are very busy trying to set up their businesses and run them. But the issues they face and the concerns they have need to be brought up and need to be brought out.
Right.
And we would love to hear that message very clearly. Somebody to sift through all the concerns they have, bring it to us so that we can address them.
Sure.
We certainly see that startups are very critical for our youth, and the energy that you see across the country is remarkable. Just about 10 days ago, I was at Coimbatore, where Tamil Nadu has hosted their Global Startup Summit.
Right.
And we, through the Métis Startup Hub, actually had taken part in that exhibition. The place was chock-a-block.
Wow.
And the energy was just remarkable.
And this is Coimbatore,
This
one
was
town.
in Coimbatore,
Yes.
in one town. What was also remarkable was, because it's a global summit, you had international participants from about 40 countries who were present there, and they were blown away by the energy of the place. So clearly, you can anecdotally and otherwise sense that this is truly the opportunity. And from this community, we need to hear clearer voices come out, and I think that's where you can really help us.
Secretary, we're here to help and support. That's the whole purpose of Startup Policy Forum. You'll hear from us, I would say, more often than probably you'd want, but we are here. But we want to just compliment the government for being totally, I would say, abreast with some of the latest issues. Our conversation was very energizing, and it's very heartening to know that the government is addressing it in such a thoughtful and calibrated manner. We're very excited to support the government as the AI story of India plays out. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.